Hello again guys, I'm going to be showing you how I process Amadou Tinder. When Amadou's processed in the correct way, it's one of the best types of tinder. It's very fibrous and it takes a spark really well. We're processing Amadou from a well-known fungi called Fomentarius, but it's more commonly known as Hoof Fungus or Tinder fungus, Tinder Conk, or my favourite Iceman fungus from that geezer they dug up. He had a little knapsack on him and inside they found little pieces of processed Amadou. Now hoofs grow on the side of trees. I've only ever found them on birch and beech, but supposedly they do grow on maple and oak as well. Now hoofs are actually a parasite that infects a tree through the damaged areas and cracks in the bark. Now ideally I'm looking for hoofs that are on standing trees. They don't have to be live. A dead standing tree is still better than one that's on the ground. When a tree's fallen, it will start to absorb the moisture, and the moisture will soak up into the hoof and it will start to affect the quality of the Amadou. When you're selecting your hoofs, if you've got a bit of choice and there's a few about, you want to pick the ones that are about the same size as your hand or a little bit smaller. These hoofs, they can live up to about 30-40 years old, and the bigger ones, they tend to be a little bit tough and they have poor quality Amadou. The smaller ones are okay, but it's a lot of work to strip them just for the small amount that you'll get from them. Now all you do to remove these is if you push your knife into the back of them and just prise them off the tree. I've collected a good bunch of hoofs now and I've just bulked it up with a few smaller ones. I'm going to hike up to my camp so I can start processing these hooves, but while I'm down here I'm just going to collect a bundle of dry birch twigs. And I'll show you why when we get back up to camp. Right, I'm back at camp, time to start stripping down these hooves. I've started a small fire using the birch twigs I collected. Now the reason for this is because when I've removed the Amadou from the hooves, we're going to boil the pieces in water and we're going to add a few handfuls of the birch ash to the mix. Now what will happen is that the ash will kind of absorb into the fibres of the Amadou like a sponge. Now I've tested it both ways. I've tested it boiling some up in straight water, then another batch in ash water, and there is a clear improvement with it. The ashed Amadou turns out a lot more fibrous, it kind of breaks up a lot better, it just takes the spark a lot better. You can roll a little piece up in your hand and it almost turns like a cotton wool texture to it. It's definitely worth doing. I've cut one in half so you can see all the layers of the hoof. Now, the outer layer is the shell, the hard shell. The inner side are the spore tubes. But we want this layer here, the darker layer. It's almost like an orangey browny colour. Looks like leather, kind of feels like cork. Okay, I'm going to cut off the shell and trim out the spore tubes, and that will just leave me with the Amadou layer. Another way to strip these, it's not very controlled, but if you get yourself a big rock and just hulk out on it, give it a good smash in, it'll break up and you can just pick out the pieces. When I'm stripping the shell off my hoofs, I always split them in half so I can actually see the thickness of the Amadou. If you see this one's a lot bigger than this hoof, but the smaller hoof has a lot more Amadou than the larger one. So you never know really how much you're going to get from each one, so it's worth just splitting them in half. Sometimes it's so thin, it's just not worth it. When I'm stripping my hoofs, when I'm stripping the shell off them, I don't really bother going right down to the bottom. I just strip the top half of the hoof and take off the thickest part of the Amadou. Okay, when you're removing the spores, I just slice down them, and then as you take the section out, as long as you're careful, it won't pull too much of the Amadou layer off. Okay, I've filled the pot and added a couple of handfuls of birch ash. I've got some really good pieces of Amadou. I'm going to soak them in a mix for an hour without any heat, and then I'm going to bring it to the boil and keep them going for another hour. Okay, that's been in for about an hour now. It's gone really soft. What we're going to do now is put it on the boil. We're going to keep it going for about an hour, but the longer the better. Just remember to keep topping up the water. Right, it's been on a constant boil for about 60-70 minutes now, so I'm going to take it out and let the pieces cool down. I've got some really good pieces of Amadou now. It's softened up really nicely. I'm going to use this rock and give each piece a little beating. It'll remove a lot of the water so it'll dry quicker, but mainly it's just to break up the fibres so it'll take a spark a lot better. I'm not really hammering it, I'm just letting my axe's weight fall down on it. Okay, it's all turned out really well. What I'll do now is I'll let it dry for a day or two, then I'll drop a few sparks on a piece, but I think this is a really good batch. Hello again guys, the Amadou's been drying for a couple of days. Most of it's turned out really well, really soft, it just feels like leather. Like every batch I've made, there's a few bad pieces. It's kind of gone hard and brittle, but I'm really happy with the quality of the rest. I used to like this stuff by taking a piece, scraping the top layer and building a nice pile of Amadou fluff, then I'll drop a spark on that, but then you're using this whole piece for one fire and you could get 4 or 5 fires from it. So what I do now is, really just to conserve the Amadou, but I just scrape the top layer and using the saw on my multi-tool really just because it's quicker. And I just scrape up a nice pile of the Amadou fluff. And just transport that onto a little bit of birch. Instead of using the full piece, I've got a nice little pile there that I can just drop a spark onto. By lighting a piece this size, this will probably keep on going for about an hour and a half, so there'll be no rush to add it to your bird's nest. And once you've got that amber, you can just add that to your bird's nest. Okay, thanks for watching my video. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment and subscribe. Okay guys, take care. Bye bye.